Hey, good morning, it's Grace. Today, on my every day of December helpful video kick I've got, we're going to be talking about the hamstrings, so the back of the thigh. I'd say most people that I meet are tight through the back of the thigh, and everyone has this idea of how to stretch the back of the thigh. And even though it can be helpful, there's a way that is probably more beneficial than what most people are doing. And so what most people are doing is really helpful and feels good for that moment, but in the long run isn't really going to be very helpful and actually might create more damage than it is helpful. So we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the body and why stretching a certain way is going to be a little bit better than stretching another way. So every muscle in the body has an origin where that muscle starts, and then it has an insertion where that muscle ends. So for the hamstrings, all of the muscles at the back of the thigh that are making up the hamstrings or originate either at the pelvis, at the ischial tuberosity, or the sits bones as we call them in yoga. You know, you hear the teacher say, push your sits bones back all the time. That's where the hamstring starts, except for one part, which actually attaches at the back of the femur bone, the big long thigh bone. And then they're gonna come down and attach or insert somewhere in the shin, the lower leg. So if we're looking at the joints that are kind of at the top and the bottom of the hamstrings, we're looking at the hips and we're looking at the knees. So most people, when they get into a fold, whether it's standing or seated, end up kind of locking their knees back straight. And then if they're tight in the posterior chain, it's going to pull the pelvis in that direction, because remember, that's where it's originating at. And if you lock the knees back, it's pulling the insertion point back as well. So now the origin is being pulled down and the insertion is being pulled back, and you end up with a round back and you can't get very far, and you struggle all day to get deeper and deeper into your fold, and nothing happens because you're not stretching the hamstrings. You're basically just rounding your back, and what you're doing is starting to put a lot of strain and stress into the lower back. So what we need to do is bend and move the joints in a way that is going to be most beneficial for opening that muscle. So like I said a moment ago, if you're tight, it's going to pull the pelvis under and the knee back. So what we need to do is bend the knee forward and push the pelvis up to be able to get the most beneficial stretch. So knees bend forward, hips pull up, and now you're being able to stretch the muscle from the middle, the belly of the muscle, and you're going to feel it pull toward the origin and toward the insertion. This is also going to create a longer back, and you'll be able to fold forward a lot more easily. Another thing that I think people just kind of get a little bit confused with when it comes to forward folding is they fold down instead of forward. If you're thinking about what a forward fold is, you're closing off forward space. You're not moving down, otherwise it would be called the downward fold. You're moving forward. So to get the best, deepest forward fold, you're trying to bring forward space together. The ribs and the thighs will touch to bring you into your deepest forward fold. A lot of people don't like this because sometimes their forward fold looks like this. And a deep bend in the knee makes people feel like they're doing it incorrectly, when really a deep bend in the knee might be the best thing for that person. So it doesn't really matter how straight the legs are in your fold. What we're looking for is closing forward space so we can best open the belly of the muscle, the middle of the hamstrings, and feel the stretch toward the origin, toward the insertion. If we're stretching the hamstrings from the floor, let's say we're doing a seated forward fold, pachimottanasana. Same thing happens. People's knees lock back, their pelvis gets pulled under toward the tight belly of the muscle, and they end up trying to do this, and they get stuck. And they're frustrated, and then they say, I'm not flexible enough to practice yoga, which is bullshit, by the way. Everyone is able-bodied to do yoga. Being flexible has nothing to do with it. In fact, if you're inflexible, that's better. You are going to have a lower risk of getting injured than someone that's already flexible. But anyway, going back to forward fold, if you're tight here, and it's locking your knees back, and it's making your feet get all goofy, what we should do is elevate the hips. So by elevating your hips on one, or you could also sit your blocks side by side and sit on them like that if you want like a longer bench. Elevate your hips. This way you can push your hips back. And now we can start to get a bend in the knee. Or sometimes I'll take a rolled up blanket underneath my knees. That way I can't hyperextend. It kind of is a bit of a support to keep me from doing that. And think about turning your toes up to the ceiling like your feet are flat pressing into the ground if you were standing up. That's what we're looking for. If your feet are here, standing folding is going to be a lot harder because you've been practicing seated folds with a foot in a position that's not going to help you. You want to pretend that your feet are flat on the ground. Push your hips back. Keep that little bit of a bend in the knee, or maybe bend your knees way more. Either way is fine. If you're working with a super bent knee up high, work with a super bent knee on the floor too. Remember, it's about closing forward space, ribs and thighs toward each other. And that head, people love doing this, but your neck and your lower back have matching curves. So if you drop your head forward, your lower back is going to want to curve too. So think ears over shoulders, ribs to thighs, folding forward. In fact, a nice little trick to keep your neck longer in forward folds. Hold the block behind your behind your body like this, and try not to grip and pull away, but pull your palms into the block. And that way when you fold, reach your block to the ceiling, giving more length to the neck. Or if you don't have a block, fold, take your hands to your elbows and then pull your forearms to your forehead. Keep your shoulders where they are and then drop the arms. So that way we maintain a long neck. You can do the same thing in a seated fold. Take the block behind you and fold to help maintain that longer neck. Hope you found this video to be helpful today. Please subscribe. And then check out my website, graceduckwith.com, as I prepare to launch my online yoga studio in January. Cheers. See you this weekend.